Ladies and gentlemen, guys and gals, hey, welcome to the show today, Super Agents Live. And if you're new, thanks for showing up. I hope you like what we do here and what I do on this show. I talk with top producing real estate agents, coaches, and authors. Now, listen, if you don't sell real estate, that's okay. We're really talking about entrepreneurship, but through the lens of a real estate agent. Now, today's guest, I'll tell you, man, I enjoyed this guy. I like this guy. He's a really cool guy. He's in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. His name is Greg Harrelson. Now, this guy has 3 offices. He's got about 60 agents, and we cover a lot of stuff. I'll give you sort of like a tweetable thing that he said, and here's what he said. He said, real estate is a contact sport. Every deal starts with a contact. Like, man, that makes so much sense. So bearing that in mind, real estate is a contact sport. We talk about a bunch of stuff. We talk about, phone prospecting and how to get better at phone prospecting, how to get to where you can make 20 contacts in an hour. We talk about why you should stay in your zone and perfect your skills before moving on. And I see this all the time with people, right? That next bright, shiny object. They start on something, they're like, oh, that's pretty cool. Let me abandon the thing that I've been working on and move on. So he really says, hey, stay in the zone, perfect the thing that you're working on. We talk about personalities, and we really get into personality types and how your DISC profile, and if you don't know what that is and you have not taken the test, send me an email and I will send you a link and you can take it. But he talks about why your DISC profile may dictate what type of business you will build. Certain personality profiles lend themselves to being more on the buyer side. Other personality profiles lend themselves to be on the listing side. So we talk about how to get out of your comfort zone, how you can do that, why you should do that. And look, even if you're shy, how you can go out and nail it in real estate. So I hope you like it. I certainly did. Now, before we get to the content, as usual, a little housekeeping. If you don't or are not aware, the hashtag for this show is Unpack That Idea. We have a very strong Twitter tribe. If you're not on Twitter, get on Twitter, man. Follow me or follow the show. My Twitter handle, is at Super Agents Live. If you follow me, I promise you I'll follow you back, and you'll get more followers using that hashtag. As you guys know, I'm building out the radio arm of this platform, and I'm pretty excited. We really only launched this thing. Let me talk to you a little bit about it really quick. We launched this thing about 2 months ago and saying, hey, listen, we're going to put, and we've been working on it for about 6 months in the background. Now, so far, and here's what I want to do. Now, as you know, we can only put one agent in each market. We are only doing the top 100 radio markets across the country. So that's it. If you're in market number 132, and we can do ad buys for you for $20. We're not going to work in that market. It's just too small for us. And the other thing too is the people that we want on our team as clients. We want the tippy top people. For example, for us, we have a guy in DC. He does $100 million. He's 29 years old. We have a guy in Dallas. He does $200 million. So that's really what we're looking for. If you're out there, if you're listening and you want to get on radio and you want to turbocharge your business, send me an email. And look, if you think it's just me out here working, trying to do the show and do the radio thing, I'll tell you, we have a phenomenal team. I have an ISA that is out there and they work. She's out there calling people. I actually have 2 ISAs. I have one person calling for getting guests, and I have another person calling and introducing the radio arm to the top people out there. We have a web person, we have an internet marketing person on the team, we have a research person on the team, and we have a crack media buyer. So we are able in some markets, like DC, for example, top station, top spot, 60 seconds. You know how much it costs? $1,450. We got that down to $500. And look, don't let that scare you because, we have a guy in Charleston. Rate card was $80 for 1 minute. We got that down to cheap. We got that down to like $35, $50. $35, and we're doing 2 stations for $53. So, you don't have to have a huge budget. Our minimum ad spend is $3,000. So it's 3 to 20. And look, if you think $3,000 or $5,000 or $10,000 is expensive, it's all about the return. It's all about the return on your investment. We have a guy, we put him on the radio. He was on for 2 weeks. In that 2 weeks, he got 3 listings. His average sale is $450,000. His commission is about $11,000. It cost him $2,500 for those 2 weeks. Commission $33,000. So radio works. And without further ado, let's get to Greg Harrelson and the show. Welcome to Super Agents Live. This is the one place where you can come and hear the most successful people in real estate. You'll hear how these super agents built their businesses, how they stay productive, and how they stay motivated. Who am I? My name's Toby Salgado, and I made my first million in real estate. And I'm your host for the next 30 minutes while we talk to yet another amazing real estate entrepreneur. Stay tuned.
Let's go! Yeah!
Today on the show, super excited about having this guy on. As you all know, I talk with the top people in the nation, and this guy is top 1% nationwide, number one guy in Myrtle Beach. I'm thrilled to welcome Greg Harrelson. Hey, Greg, thanks for taking the time out today.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to make the connection.
All right. Hey, so listen, I've given the audience a brief overview of your background, but maybe take a minute, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then what you have going on today.
Okay. Well, hey, I've been in the business about 19, 20 years. I came into the business as a young guy who was trying to finish college, never really finished college, and started as a part-time telemarketer for my dad, who was already a pretty decent real estate agent in my local market. And, next thing you know, a couple years later, I said that, hey, this seems to be working. I seem to be okay at doing some prospecting. Why don't I become a full-time real estate agent? And now we're 20 years later, and here I am, man, just still punching out numbers.
How funny. So you thought, look, I talk to guys like you every now and again, and like you people like you are sort of the unsuspecting real estate agent, right? You get this part-time job, and all of a sudden, 20 years later, you're crushing it. You started as a part-time telemarketer for your dad.
Yeah.
That experience, having that sales background, having that a little bit thick skin of, being able to take rejection. How do you think that has served you in your, 2-decade career?
Well, where it really served me is it opened my eyes. See, so here's what part-time meant. So part-time meant I came into the office at 8 o'clock and I made calls for 3 hours a day, 8 to 11. Then I went to school. While I was, still kind of dabbling in college. And then after school, I came back in the evenings and prospected for 2 hours. So the interesting thing beyond the prospecting is I was never exposed to what a traditional real estate office looks like. Oh. There really isn't any agents in the office at 8 in the morning, and there's not really many agents in the office in the evening. So I was actually in the real estate industry, but never really knew anything about what the normal real estate agent did. So in a sense, all I knew was how to generate, or all I was learning at that time is generation is the only thing that matters. And because I wasn't exposed to anything else, I actually thought that maybe all the other agents were coming in after I was leaving and doing the same thing. And so day one, all I did was generate. So even, my later years, that's all I did is I said, okay, the most important thing to do is generate business every day. A day not prospecting is the same as a day not worked. And that was what developed, that mindset was developed in those earlier years.
Wow. So you were super fortunate. So you were all about lead generation. I got to tell you, I'm curious to know from you. I mean, I've had these experiences where, because I'm a sales guy, I've always been in sales, and I've had these experiences where, I have nothing. There's nothing in the pipe, and then I work hard. I get 5 appointments. I used to paint houses in college, right? And I remember this one weekend, I had nothing. I had 10 employees. I had nothing for them to do. I booked, I had 5 appointments or 6 appointments over the weekend, and boom, boom, boom. I closed them all, and I realized at that point, no matter what or what position or where I was, I can go out and make money tomorrow.
Yes.
Tell me about. I want to hear from you. I mean, tell me about when you had a similar kind of experience.
I was. Somebody had told me, and I'm not sure who this was, whether it was a Mike Ferry or whether it was my dad or maybe even Floyd Wickman. I heard it maybe on a tape. I had heard one time that you start off your day unemployed. Right. As a real estate professional, you start off every day unemployed, and then it's my choice as to whether or not I go to sleep unemployed. So it's not my choice. I'm going to wake up, and we default to being unemployed when we wake up in our industry, but it is our choice as to whether or not we end the day that way. And so, that's what was ingrained in my subconscious mind early on. And so then I knew, okay, it becomes just a numbers game. It's only about generation. If I make enough contacts, I will find somebody who will employ me. And I have to do that every single day. So it was very duplicatable and repeatable once you understood that concept.
I love that. I think if everybody had that sort of mindset, right? You wake up, you're unemployed. So for you, you started as a telemarketer, right? You were prospecting 5 hours a day, which is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Did you always stay, some people are comfortable on the phone and they don't get outside. And then other people whether that's door knocking or like talking with the guy behind you in the supermarket. How did that evolve for you?
Well, it evolved. The way that it evolved is like, okay, if a normal person could, a normal generator could do telephone prospecting and make 10 contacts an hour. Where I tried to evolve is say, how could I make 15 contacts per hour? How could I make 20 contacts an hour? So the traditional phone prospecting, years ago, we didn't have auto dialers. But it transformed from doing one phone dialing to double dialing and having a double headset. Then we went to, okay, well, now we need to get more contacts per hour. So then we went to automated dialing. So it always stayed within the prospecting arena, within telephone, prospecting, but it just evolved in how efficient we became. Once we got to a point where it says, okay, about 20 to 22 contacts per hour is about as high as you can get before you get what I call contactitis, where you're just going through the motions.
Yeah.
Then it evolved where we said, okay, now in order to get more, we got to hone our skills so it takes less contacts to make an actual appointment. But I always evolved within staying with the same activity, but just improving the quality of the or always looking for ways to improve my skills so I can improve the return on the same amount of time.
Yeah, so as we were chatting before we started recording here, I had Tom Ferry on the show, and he talked a little bit about this, and he said this. So tracking is everything. You need to track. You need to know where you're at. On average, for all of Tom's people, all the people his organization coaches, it is 60 phone calls to one appointment. And he said, well, we have some superstars that can do 20 phone calls and get one appointment. You have to be amazingly good at what you do. What is that ratio for you?
Well, so right now I'm doing more coaching of the agents inside of my company. So I'm not picking up the phone today and making calls. But when, towards the end of when I was really making a high volume of calls, I scaled mine down to about one appointment every 5 contacts.
Wow.
But at that point, I was only making maybe 10 contacts a day and only focus on the highest quality, like an expired and FSBO type of call. So I eventually moved away from doing all the cold calling, scaled the number of contacts down, but because the quality was so high of what I was calling, if I made 10 contacts, I for sure was going to get 2 to 3 appointments.
Got it. Amazing, man. So look, here's what I've seen in guys like you, right? So you have this skill. You can pick up the phone and you can make magic happen. So and really you become sort of this closing machine, right? Or just moving people, through the funnel. Did you at some point realize that you were neglecting your past clients, right? Because you were just on the hunt for new prospects?
Yeah, I mean, and that's a great observation because you probably hear this in people that do what I do. A lot of times we're those guys that we like to hunt, but we don't want to go collect what we just hunted.
Right.
And so and it becomes a sport, and we get kind of like, that becomes like our passion is just to go and hunt it and get it and feel like, okay, we did it, but somebody else needs to go ahead and clean this thing up and prepare it, right?
Yeah, right.
And so, yes, I definitely was no different than other people that do what I do. And what I ended up doing is I just made sure that I had enough staff or had, systems in place that would kind of force me and hold me accountable to work in those particular areas, really more of my coaching. So, or people who were my coaches at that time were always holding me accountable because they knew that was going to be where my weakness was.
Yeah.
So I just had to set up accountability structures to keep it going.
And look, I'll tell you something. This specific topic really has not come up on the show, but this is me, right? When I'm talking to you, I'm hearing a lot of stuff of how I do things, and because I'm a closer kind of a guy, I really do have a hard time. Being that warm, fuzzy guy, right? Calling my past clients, going, "Hey, Greg, what's going on?" Like, building that relationship is a little bit tough for me. It's easier for me just to go find somebody new.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I think there's a bunch of people that are like that. The key is being aware of that. So if you'll admit it, then the likelihood is that we're going to be able to find somebody that can do that part of our business way better than you and I can. But what so many people do is they're in denial. They don't want to admit that because it's like admitting a weakness. But in my mind, it's like once I'm aware of that, then I can easily set up the infrastructure to make sure that becomes a strength, not a weakness.
Got it. So for you spend most of your time now coaching. Now this is you're not coaching other people outside of your team. It's just your team, right?
That is correct. So I own 3 different real estate offices, 2 in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, 1 in Charleston, with approximately 60 real estate agents. So in my mind, I own a coaching company. I have 60 coaching clients.
Wow.
But that's just kind of my mental approach to the way I run my companies. I'm not coaching outside of those companies.
So let me ask you this. I'm curious about just, so 2 things. There's a bunch of stats out there, right? So one stat is only 2% of real estate agents make more than $200,000 a year. And there's another stat that says it's a crazy washout number. It's literally like 75% of people who get into real estate don't last past the first 12 months. When you were going out and people come to you and say, "Hey, Greg, I want to you're this great coach. You've had this great background. You're the number one guy. I want to join your team." What kind of things are you looking for in people that you bring into your company?
One of the things that I'm looking for is if they're coachable. And what's interesting about that is you can't just ask somebody, "Hey, Toby, are you coachable?" Because obviously the answer is yes.
Yeah.
So, in an earlier stage of a conversation, I might ask somebody something like, "Hey, have you ever had a coach, or is there ever a coach or a mentor, from your past that, has really stuck out? And can you tell me about a time when you were coached and it really made a big difference?" And then sometimes people say, "Well, I've never had a coach." Or some people give me these amazing stories of like, "Yeah, I had this coach when I was in high school and they did this and they did that." Well, that right there, depending on how they answer, that tells me whether or not they understand the coach-player relationship, because it is a very authoritative, subordinate-like relationship. Not dominant, but authority-subordinate-like relationship. And so if they've got a history of in their childhood of being in that type of relationship, then I know they're going to be comfortable with me coaching them. That's one of the things that I look for. And then I'm also looking for a desire to, I'm looking for that person that when they play Monopoly with their friends, they get in an argument. But after the Monopoly game is over, they're not upset. In other words, they have that strong desire. They just want to win, and they want to be the best that they can be, but they're not going to cry when they lose.
Right.
And so that's what I'm looking for is coachability. I'm looking for people to have a desire to succeed. And then I'm looking for people that will follow structure. Are you this guy that you coming into the business because you heard that, I got freedom of my time and I can just come and go when I want to? That's not for me. I'm looking for somebody that says, "Hey, you won't have to work long hours, but you're going to have to be pretty intense in the hours that you do work. And this is what the schedule looks like. If you'll follow that structure, then I can coach you." And a lot of people will run away right there because they're saying, "No, I've already had a job where I have to clock in and clock out. I don't want structure. That's why I'm getting into real estate." So that eliminates them right then.
Yeah.
But those are the 3 things that I'm looking for.
Interesting. It's so funny that you touch on that point. First of all, there's a lot of stuff that you said there that I want to dig into, but a lot of people get into real estate because they want time freedom and they want financial freedom. The problem is they abuse the time freedom and they'll never ever get the financial freedom because of that.
Yes, I mean, financial freedom is something that's earned, and what we have to do is we have to invest time to do it. So what they're doing is they don't want to invest the time, but they want to pull the investment out. It just doesn't work that way.
So earlier you talked about this authority and being subordinate, and I want to dig into that a little bit because I recently had this guy on the show, Rick Ruby. I don't know if you know Rick.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I know Rick.
So I had Rick on the show, and Rick, he's got a very, strong personality, and he was like, what he told me is like, hey, with the people that I coach, I want them to surrender. And I'm like, man, like like surrender, like who's going to do that? But he said, just do what I say and I can double your production.
Yes.
What is your viewpoint on that? Is it, because look, I help people too. I coach people. The show is coaching people. And I have some people who say, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And I have other people who say, listen, I have these ideas, but I need help refining them. Maybe unravel that what I just said, if you could.
Yeah. So the term surrender, it doesn't mean they have to be submissive and they don't have to bow down. That is not necessarily what surrender means. But I would share that same thought that Rick has, but maybe my approach would be different. Would be have faith, like just kind of give up with you think it needs to look like and allow me to share this information and take it on and have faith and follow it through, execute. And then at the end, after you fully execute it, then we'll judge whether or not it was the right thing or the wrong thing. But in the beginning, you have to surrender. You have to have faith. You kind of have to give up your own ego. And that's how I would say, how I would describe the term surrender. But I do think it's very relevant. And then when it comes to coaching, I think some of the best coaches that lead their teams, what they're doing is they're not trying to, it's kind of like cooking a frog when it comes to agents. The way that you don't cook a frog is you don't put a frog in boiling hot water because it'll just jump right out.
Right.
What you have to do is you have to kind of take the water that the frog came from, put it in there, and it'll just kind of relax. And it's like, this feels comfortable. And then slowly turn up the heat. And next thing you know, the frog's cooked and no one even realized it. And I think that's the approach that we have to take with coaching our real estate agents, is we have to get into their world. And we have to understand what their comfort is. And then slowly turn up the heat. And if they have trust in you as the leader, they're going to allow that to take place. And once they start seeing the results, then they're going to be addicted. And then the real player-coach relationship can start.
Got it. What a great analogy, man. I mean, have faith and slowly turn up the heat. So let me ask you this. A lot of people, real estate, if you, for the most part, right, if you are certainly familiar with the DISC profile, and everybody in the audience, if you're not, send me an email. I'll send you a link. You can take the test. But so most agents are moderately high on the D and high on the I, right? Very gregarious people. I have two questions. One, people that are high D, high I, do they find it harder to have faith or surrender in that regard? And two, if you're not high I, if you're not super gregarious, I know you can still win and succeed in real estate, but what are the methods, right? Those are two different personalities that will win in very different ways. So maybe I'm giving you these big long questions, and it's my fault. I need to break them in thirds, but maybe talk about the personality types in that regard. Yeah.
So. First of all, somebody that's a high I, let's just say they're more gregarious and they're maybe more expressive, right?
Yeah.
Then, they're the type of people that would appeal more to the buyer side of the transaction because people buy off emotion. People sell off logic. So if you're a high D, then you're typically more black and white, and you're probably more logical in the way that you evaluate and the way that you present. Because sellers sell off logic, then that's the perfect personality. But those that are a little bit more expressive by nature, buyers buy off emotion, so those are the people that tend to be better buyer's agents. Now, I'm not going to be the person that tells you what you should be, but what I've seen historically is that people, based on their personality, they tend to enjoy and excel in one side of the transaction more than they do the other. And I for that. I explain to people what I just said to you, but then I sit back and a new agent comes in and I kind of observe, and what'll happen is I'll tell them all the things they need to know in the first 30 to 90 days to get some business. And then all of a sudden you'll see that they start focusing on one side of the transaction more. They stop prospecting, but they start working more buyers, or vice versa. And I can tell you, it always falls in line with what their personalities are.
That is very, very interesting. I think that's very intuitive of you. I mean, you're the first person that's came on the show and has delivered in that way. So somebody who is, what if somebody is low I, right? So they're more introverted than extroverted. They're timid. They don't feel good with about the word sales. They don't feel good if they feel like they're selling somebody. How can those people go out? Because I mean, look, again, there's people out there like that who go, man, I want to win in real estate, but I don't feel good about sales, and I'm a little bit introverted.
Yeah. So the person who has a fear of calling themselves a salesperson, because there is a lot of those out there.
Yeah.
They just don't want to be known as salesperson. And so, there's a difference. I mean, I could ask one person, hey, how many homes do you want to sell this year? Or I can ask the question differently. How many families would you like to serve this year? So how many families would you like to assist them in moving into their dream home, or assist them in relocating back to where they come from? So that type of language is the language that we would need to that we'd need to use to influence an agent that wants to avoid being a salesperson. Because that person that doesn't want to sell, what they're thinking is they probably had an experience in their childhood where their mom or dad said, I hate salespeople. So the last thing they want to do is become a salesperson, and then they're exactly what is going to disappoint their parents. Even though that's a deep thing to be thinking about, that's probably what's going on. So the opposite of selling somebody something would be serving somebody. Mm. And so we just have to change the language. So if I'm coaching you and you're that type of personality, I'm not going to ask you how many homes you want to sell.
Right.
I'm not going to talk to you about this script is what you're going to use to close people down. I might say, this is the way you need to communicate to make sure that they're experiencing what you're wanting to accomplish here.
Yeah.
So I changed the language.
That's good. I love that. It's funny. So I know you work with Mike Ferry, and as we talked earlier, Mike's been on the show. Mike's system is very, it's really simple, right? It's make the call, go out, and ask for the business. That's it. And I won't say his name, but I had one of Mike's coaches on here, and as we talked, I said, we were talking about expireds. I said, how do what do people do with expireds? And he tells me this thing is like, hey, here's what you should do. 7:45 in the morning, go to that expires, go to their house. And I said, okay, you go there to their house. What do you say? He's like, here's what you say. Hi, Mr. Seller. We have an emergency. Your house is unrepresented right now. And I'm like, man, do you know what kind of cojones it takes to do that? Like, there's a very small portion of people that can do that. Mm-hmm. So Mike, I want you to jump in there. So in terms of, you have 60 coaching clients, because that's, you have 60 team members. Is that the kind of thing that you promote, or is that the kind of thing that you teach?
Yeah, I mean, whether it's that exact script or not, but yes, I promote that taking a very active approach to lead generation.
Okay. Whether
it be knocking on doors or, prospecting, and others active, meaning we're going to go out and create something versus wait for something to happen. And so absolutely. Now you have to understand, when we're dealing with, 60, people in my company, or whether Mike Ferry's dealing with, 2,000 people in his coaching company, it's very important that the coach, once again, understand their client, their coaching client, the person that they're coaching, and figure out where those barriers are. I mean, my job is not to take you from a 2 to a 10 in 1 month. It's just to get you to, maybe be comfortable doing a 3, or, just move you up one layer, one notch at a time, slowly. And so you don't get as much resistance as you would think, as long as there's a system that helps them progress to those things. And then there's going to be personalities that are just going to say, no, I'm never going to knock on a door, and that's perfectly fine. There are many ways to generate income in this real estate industry, and we just have to find the ones that that particular person's willing to engage in.
Got it. Yeah, there you go. I mean, that's a whole method of slowly turning up the heat, and slowly getting out of your comfort zone. So you've had a career of 20 years. That's a long time to be doing anything, the same thing over and over again. You've seen a lot of agents come and go. If you had to like pick one theme or one thing that where you see most new agents or aspiring agents fall down and fail, what is that one thing that you see where, I'm sure you can just see people's business go, man, if you just change that one thing, so many more things would fall into place.
They don't understand that real estate is a contact sport.
Got it.
It's all contacts.
And
every transaction starts with a contact. It doesn't matter how you get the transaction. Starts with a contact. And if you don't understand the ratios and the numbers, and if you don't treat this business as if it's a real business, which is you track your numbers, you evaluate the numbers, and you adjust accordingly, then the chances of succeeding is very unlikely. So as a new agent that's coming in, most of them never understand that that's how the top producers become top producers.
Right. And it's funny, we have a very strong Twitter tribe out there, and I got to tell you, I know for a fact that people are going to tweet that left and right. Real estate is a contact sport.
Yeah.
So, you were, I think, again, I said it earlier, but you're very fortunate that you got your start with being a telemarketer, right? You were, you got used to being rejected. And I'll ask this, real estate is a business of no's. It's a business of rejection. And sometimes you get rejected and deals fall apart and there's those days or weeks where you just go, man, you feel like you got kicked in the gut and you're like, I can't get up and go through this again. Tell me about a time when did you ever feel like that, and how did you push through that roadblock to find success?
I tell you, I hate to say this, because it's sometimes unbelievable, but I really didn't have an issue with rejection. And there might be times where I've had some times where I'm getting bored, right? And I'm getting complacent. And but rejection is just not something that's really ever been an issue. But here's the reason, I think, and I caught on to something that you just said, you got to go through all these no's. Here's the deal. If it's going to take me, hypothetically, 200 contacts to get a listing and make a sale. Let's just say it's going to take me 200 contacts to get a listing and for that listing to sell.
Yeah.
So that means I went through 199 no's and 1 yes. But the time I invested, the expense that I incurred, is an expense for the entire 200 contacts. So when I take my commission check, let's say it's $5,000. In order to assess a real value on my time, I have to include the time it took to get the no's. So I'll take the 200 contacts, divide into the $5,000, and whatever that is, let's just say that's $250 or maybe it's $25. I'm not sure what that is, but whatever that number is, then that's how much I make per contact. So I actually make more money on the no's than I do on the yes. I made $25 times 199 and only $25 for the one contact. So it's like, man, so if somebody, let's just say somebody was to hang up on me, because that would be a form of rejection. Most people would be like, oh my gosh. I was like, dude, thank goodness that person hung up on me. They only cost me 5 seconds. They could have cost me 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I made $25 in 5 seconds. I can't wait for the next one. The yeses are just going to come statistically over time. So that's where it's like, man, I never thought of it as rejection. I thought every no was X amount of dollars to me.
That is awesome, man. I love that. I really love that illustration. I had somebody come on the show and illustrate it in a different way, and this is what she does. For her, she's very strong with mining her past clients, and she knows for every 13 calls, she's going to get a deal, right? For every 13 calls, she's going to get a deal. So what she does is she puts 12 paper clips up, and when she makes a call, she pulls that paper clip down. But the 13th one, instead of a paper clip, it's $100 bill. So she can see it. She's like, okay, I'm getting closer. I'm getting closer. I'm getting closer. That's great. I hope people, implement that notion of every no is worth $25. And 200 calls, that's really low. Right? I mean, I'm sorry, that's really, really high. Most people are going to do it much quicker than that. Yeah,
we just built in a scenario. It's just like it's the formula. Right. It's like, because so many people, they get excited. They'll go for 2 days and they prospect and they don't get anything. And then on the third day, they get like 2 appointments.
Right.
And so the first 2 days, they're all disappointed. And the third day, they're all excited. It's like, what about this roller coaster ride? Because statistically over time, your ratios are what your ratios are. every contact that you made for the last 2 days is just as important as the one yes that you get on the third day.
Yeah, I agree. So in 2014, so you've been through a couple booms and a couple busts. Mm-hmm. And I think especially down, in 2014, you need to be really agile. How did you, what did you do let's go back to '08, for example, right? We come off this boom, like everything's going crazy, from '01 to '07, then all of a sudden '08 happens, Lehman fails, the world is melting. How did you adjust your business at that time?
Well, the reality is it was anybody that's trying to adjust at that time was way too late. So if you're really looking at the numbers and by the time '08 came, that's when the media took on and said life is over, real estate's over. That was when the media got it. But a good real estate agent that understands their market, they should have seen that in 2006. Just by looking at certain numbers, like, what is the average list to sales price? Is there more negotiating going on? Days on market, And so what happened, we got fooled because in a lot of markets, the days on market was like 10 days. And that's how it was in my market. But when I saw the market go from 10 days on average to make a sale to 15 days, most of us would look at that and say, well, that's no big deal. I'm still selling them, as fast as can be. But no, that was a 50% increase in the days on market. And you have to turn those things into percentages. And when you start to look at those things, then I said to myself, and I'm not claiming that I predicted the bust, but what I did do is I said, something doesn't look right. So let's go ahead and start performing as if we're already in a down market, and then whatever happens, if it does happen, we're ready, and if it doesn't happen, then it doesn't matter.
Interesting.
So that's really what we did. So we were already changing our what we were doing inside the company probably 2 years before. But now my market didn't bust in 2008. It really busted in 2007. So at the beginning of 2006 is when we started preparing for it.
Got it. That's interesting. That you look at the data like that. So how is business? If you compare like '06 was a great year. '05. Let's say '05. '05 was a great year everywhere. How is business different from '05 and if somebody is going to build their business today, how is it different now than it was then?
Well, if I was going to go into the business and start to build and try to become a top producer, I wouldn't change anything that I did. Now, the ratios may be different, so we have to look at the ratios, but I would get up, I'd be in the office, I'd prospect 3 hours a day in the morning, and then depending on how aggressive I wanted to grow, I might do some more evening prospect a few nights a week. So I would not change the methods that I use to grow, but we would have to monitor your numbers to see what the ratios are. So the ratios might be different in a down market versus a hot market. So it might take more contacts or less contacts to get the same amount of business. But the methods that we use would be the same. I'm teaching the same methods today as I was teaching before to build top producers. Now, it's as simple as that. It's just the ratios may be different.
Right. And I was actually looking for an answer similar to that because in reality, a guy like you you're a lead generator guy, right? So you're going to, again, the rate you said a minute ago, the ratios are going to be different. In a lot of ways, I could frame what you've done, Greg, in a different ways. You have built your business that is independent of the outside market.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I mean, if I don't pray that the market's ever going to go down, but the reality is when the market goes down, it's kind of like when the tide goes out, you see who's swimming naked.
Yeah.
When the market goes down, you see who the skilled real estate agents are, and because there's less agents in the business, then there's fewer people that get to go after a bigger piece of pie. So I mean, a real good, in my opinion, the top agents that are really skilled actually gain market share in a down market. Yeah. They don't gain it in an up market, they gain it in a down market.
Right. And again, going back to '05, there's lots of people who thought they were rock stars.
Oh, man.
And then realized they were not when the markets are. So again, you're heavy prospecting. I love that idea. A lot of people struggle with that. Even if they're comfortable with making calls or knocking on doors, what list do you prospect? I mean, do you use Red X or Land Voice Data, or what list do you prospect through? If you're new, not you. I mean, you have a giant past client list.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So we've used RedX and LandVoice. I mean, Cole's directory, is where you can get a lot of numbers for the residential numbers. All of those services that offer numbers, or the RedX will give us the FISBOs and the expireds delivered to us every morning before we're even awake. Those are the services that we're using.
So basically, again, we have a deal with LandVoice. So if anybody wants to use LandVoice, you can try it out for free just using landvoicedata.com/superagentslive. But so do you pick a geographic farm and go, okay, because again, LandVoice or RedX, I'm sure can do that. You pick this area, and then is that who you just comb through, or?
Yeah, well, we don't do a lot of geographic farming, but what we will do is we'll call behind our just solds. So depending on where we've sold that week is going to dictate the list that we're going to pull and call.
Interesting. Interesting. So you have it just sold, and then you would call that area. Now, do you ever mail it as well, or you just call? They get added to the list or not?
We don't do a lot of mailing. I mean, we do some mailing. We don't do a ton. And what would determine if I was doing a mail is if I really wanted to capture a large portion of the market share in a particular community. Then I would create a 12-month marketing calendar where we would do a mail campaign, an email campaign, and a call campaign.
Got it. Okay. So for a guy like you, Greg, if you are just a guy out there, just give me a list of numbers, and I'm going to comb through it. I'm going to find the nuggets of gold in there. So that means that you don't really have a niche. Like, you're just a general business guy. You will sell whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I do believe that some of the most stable real estate, team businesses or companies are those that diversify in inventory. I think it's very dangerous to actually go and be too nichey because, I live in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So those companies that were all nichey on the ocean front, when the resort market took a tank, I mean, those companies went out of business, or if they did survive, they definitely, spent their last 10 years worth of wealth just to keep their doors open. Yeah. And so, even though I was heavy into the oceanfront condos, I was also heavy into the residential homes. So when one market wasn't doing so well, there was still another market there. So I think diversification in your inventory is critical.
That is really interesting. Most people that come on the show will say, hey, you really have to have a niche. And, people will come on and say, listen, I only do downtown condos, right? I won't do a resident. If it's a residential or it's a commercial, I just pass it along.
Yeah. I think that's the difference in building production and building a business.
Interesting.
So I don't think as a producer, that might be okay. But as a business person, that's very risky.
Interesting, man. So you're just a very, very old school guy. So what about, do you use social media at all? Or is it basically give me a phone, give me a list, and I'm going to find whoever wants to buy or sell on that list?
I mean, we have no social media strategies for generating. Am I on Facebook? Sure I am. Do I post things? Sure I do. There's no strategy for generating. Look, dude, my business is very boring. Okay? So, the key with me and the way that I run my operation is you have to master repetitious boredom. And I feel like that's really what we have mastered, is we have mastered repetitious boredom. But if you think about it, we look at Michael Jordan. That's what he did. He mastered repetitious boredom. And that's why one day in a game, he closed his eyes and he shot a free throw and it went in. So in order to be that good at what he was at his sport, he had to do it over and over and over and over again. And so if you look at the true legends in any sport, those guys had the most boring lives. They sat on the golf course and took the same putter and practiced the same putt in the same location hundreds of times and then moved it 2 inches and did it again hundreds of times. That's a very boring thing to do, but that's why they actually made the millions they made.
That is really interesting, man. So that's this is the 10,000 hour rule. Who said that?
Yes.
Malcolm Gladwell, right? You have to 10,000 hours, and then you become a true expert. So there you go, man. We got to start wrapping up, but I think I've gotten everything I can out of you. It's a contact sport. Get the 10,000 hours. Get bored and get fine with that. Is there anything else that for the people listening and they resonate with this? What else do you think? This is a question I ask very, very few people, but I'm going to ask you. What is one thing I didn't ask you, but I should have asked you?
That's a good question. That's a tough one. I would say, in how are things changing in the industry, and how does that impact because of automation with lead generation as being so automated? How does that actually change the game for somebody who does old school prospecting? That might be a question that would be a very valid question.
And how would you answer that?
Yeah, so my answer is this, and because I have been asked this question, I've thought about it. It's a fantastic question. The key is, as lead generation becomes automated, then what's happening is we're using technology to connect us with the consumer. As more and more consumers are connected through technology, they become disconnected when it comes to actual intimate relationships. So what's amazing is most agents are moving to technology to do the lead generating. There's fewer people making personal contacts. When we're making personal contacts, it's almost looked at, oh, wow, you guys are actually calling me? Wow, I haven't talked to any realtors in a long time. So it's interesting, as we become more connected, like via social media, like how many fans and friends you have, we become more disconnected. So in a way, technology is disconnecting us when it comes to more of intimate relationships, but it may be connecting us when it comes to more reach. So what we're focusing on in our calls is making sure that in our communication, we're not using sales language, we're using serving language. And that's one thing that is becoming fewer. It's harder and harder to find people who will communicate from a contribution type of language versus a I want language. And all the technologies out there that are collecting leads are real flashy, real gimmicky, and we're seeing that that's actually giving us an advantage.
Very interesting. And really quickly, what does that script sound like? What does that serving language sound like when you call me? Well,
I'm still going to say, hey, Toby, we just sold a property. And, when one sells, a lot of times another one will sell right away. I'm just kind of curious. When do you plan on moving? You say never. I said, okay, fantastic. How long have you been in the community? So instead of just bailing on you because you said no, we're actually going to get an understanding of who you are. And this has to be done very quick. But then here's what's going to happen. I'm going to say, I appreciate the time, and it doesn't sound like you're going to do anything. But, one thing that a lot of your neighbors have asked me to do is they've asked me to keep in touch with them and just, give them an idea if there's any changes in the market. Toby, that anytime the market shifts, a lot of times that can have a major impact on your investment. What is your email address? I'll make sure you get the same information.
Got it.
Now all of a sudden, that person coughs up their email address, allows me to communicate, and then depending on what I'm sending them is going to dictate whether or not they see me as a giver or a taker. Awesome. So I'm never going to send anything that says, hey, you should list with me. I'm going to say, hey, here's some things that are going on in the market. Let me know if you ever need any information.
I love it. What CRM do you use, Greg?
Infusionsoft.
Got it. Well, that's an expensive one. That's like $200 a month, right?
For me, I'm spending a lot more of that because all my 60 agents are in it.
Got it. Got it.
But it does some amazing things that you can't do with any other CRMs. It's an intelligent CRM, so it's very predictive.
Well, Greg, hey, man, I really, really appreciate you coming on the show. I'm going to ask you the same two last questions I ask everybody. Here's the first one. I'm an aspiring agent. I have $25. What book should I go buy today? What book should you go buy? Yeah, book. $25. I would actually go buy The One Thing by Gary Keller. There you go. Yeah. And look, if you guys out in the audience have not read that, you can get a free copy. Use our link, audibletrial.com/superagentslive. My last question to you, Greg, before I let you go, do you have any personal habits that you feel have contributed to your success? A characteristic I would say is I love to compete at anything at all times. And I would say that personality is almost a habit, that everything almost becomes a competition, at least in my mind. And I think that fuels me
to really push and get everything I can out of the things that I engage in.
Got it. Perfect. Well, listen, I'm sure you're always on the look for talent. So anybody that's out there in the Myrtle Beach area, where are your offices, Greg?
It's Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and Charleston, South Carolina.
There you go. Reach out to Greg, and if somebody says, "Hey, I love the message that Greg has," where can people go out, find you, say thank you for coming on the show, or say, "Hey, man, I want to join your team"?
You can email me at gregharrelson@gmail.com, or I'm on Facebook too.
Thanks, bud. Hey, I really appreciate you coming on the show, and let's keep in touch.
Thank you so much.
See you, Greg.
Let's go.